Our next presenter is Tim Wilson. His program is called Someone Call for a Doctor, and it's about the physicians and nurses at Grand Canyon between 1890 and 1940. He's a lifelong Arizonan and a Munns Park resident. He's been leading tours at Grand Canyon for over a decade. He's currently a guide for Canyon Dave Tours, and he recently started his own tour company, Tim on the Rim, LLC. He loves his office. Most of us who are at the Canyon love our offices. And he's constantly seeking out new information and history to learn and share with other Grand Canyon enthusiasts. And so here's Tim Wilson.
Good morning. Thank you all so very much for being here this morning. For the next few minutes, we'll be talking about the doctors and nurses of Grand Canyon in those early decades. So let's get right into it. We saw this picture last night. That gentleman right there, unfortunately, came down with appendicitis while in the canyon. He actually designed and developed this muleback stretcher. Got to be one of the first people to use it. So the pioneer era of Grand Canyon, which I'm basically defining as before the advent of automobiles and a lot of the roads that were built up to the Grand Canyon, so late teens, early 20s or so. But there were no doctors at Grand Canyon before 1919. This is going to be a short presentation. Residents here and visitors both relied on the doctors in Williams and Flagstaff for primary care and often for emergencies. But you could also rely on visiting doctors. There were a lot of them coming through Grand Canyon in those days. Doctors, being one of those higher income jobs and professions, they were able to travel and go on vacation more often. The completion of the railroad and other automobile roads really helped facilitate faster travel and allowed doctors to make much faster house calls in those teens and 20s. And a lot of those early Grand Canyon entrepreneurs, the hoteliers, the miners, they would contract these local doctors as house surgeons. So these guys from Flagstaff and Williams, they would have to come up here often to treat people. But a few anecdotes, or at least one story about a visiting doctor involves, we all know, John Hance. And this comes from Doctor on Horseback by Ralph Palmer. He was a doctor in Mesa and has a really wonderful little book that I got to see at the Arizona Historical Society. And he tells a story about trying to treat John Hance's hernia with a steel leg truss, and it did not work. It was not a success. John Hance tried it for a day or so and just could not bear it. Doctors from near and far came to visit Grand Canyon. It was a destination. Everybody wanted to see it. And in 1891, we had the geologists, first major group of geologists visiting the canyon. They went up to John Hance's camp, stayed there, and a few doctors came along with. Dr. D.J. Brannon of Flagstaff and a couple of doctors from California accompanied them. Dr. Brannon signed John Hance's guest book. So, getting into those pioneer doctors of Flagstaff and Williams. We'll start with Flagstaff. This is an early picture of downtown with the first buildings in what they call Newtown. And then we get to, yes, Dr. Dennis J. Brennan. He and his brother, PJ, were very important founding fathers of Flagstaff. PJ was a mercantile owner, owned one of the first stores in Old Town, moved to Newtown, was basically the first person to move into downtown Flagstaff, and his mercantile building and Dr. Brannon's office are still there. That's the Wild West Trading Post on Route 66. And they could possibly be the oldest buildings in downtown Flagstaff that are still standing today. The Brannons did not stick around very long. They left Flagstaff in the late 1900s, around 1906, 1907. Sorry about the little thing there, but that's George Felix Manning. He was a character. He's the one standing on the left. He was short in stature and in temper, but he was considered brilliant by everybody who knew him. And he had quite a crazy history, wonderful, interesting story. He was a Confederate soldier, moved all the way up to the inspector of artillery for Robert E. Lee's army, and even was exiled in Mexico for a little while before the general pardon was issued to all Confederate soldiers and officers. He moved to Texas after graduating from the University of Alabama Medical School. He was in El Paso for a while. He got involved with a number of feuds and even shot the marshal, but he was acquitted. Still, that ran him out of town, and he ended up in Arizona. Arrived in Flagstaff in 1889, and he would raise his family here in Flagstaff. And his sons, George Felix Jr. and Thomas Peyton, they were also doctors. Thomas Peyton went to the University of Alabama Medical School. It became sort of a family tradition to do that, and all of them were heavily involved in the Coconino County development of medicine and healthcare in Coconino County. George Sr., he was instrumental in developing the Coconino County Hospital, now the Arizona Pioneer Museum in Flagstaff, and both of his sons worked there, and they all held statewide, county-wide, and city positions. So they were very, very important, and they would make calls up to Grand Canyon. Dr. George Sr. was Pete Berry's favorite doctor and druggist. At least that's what I base off of, just on a tiny little note written on a receipt that Pete Berry had. So a couple of headlines from the Coconino Sun in the 19-teens. These definitely refer to Thomas Peyton Manning. George Sr. would certainly have been in his 80s by this point, so probably retired. But yes, they would make calls up to the canyon for a variety of reasons. You have Dr. Manning called up to the canyon because of a frozen Mexican. And unfortunately, you didn't have very PC language in the newspapers back then. But this one on the right is a little more interesting, where you have a Navajo boy who unfortunately drowned in the Little Colorado River near Cameron, and they had to retrieve the body by making a log raft. And of course, they got soaking wet and they almost drowned, but they were able to retrieve the body, fortunately. And that moves us on to Dr. Ralph Raymond. Almost everybody in Flagstaff who knows a bit about Flagstaff history is familiar with Dr. Raymond. He's actually buried right off the Kachina Village exit, right off I-17, the Raymond County Park there. And quite a character as well, described as the Flagstaff's most memorable man, elegant and eccentric. And of course he is. He's got corgis, who doesn't love corgis? And he was an organic farmer, fanatic for grain and honey. He loved to experiment with baking and was just obsessed with making the best bread, and also dabbled in beekeeping a little bit. His office is still around, and that's 8 North LaRue Street, just north of Route 66 in downtown Flagstaff. A couple of more newspaper from the Coconino Sun articles, just real quick little blurbs. There's Dr. P.A. Mellick and Dr. R.O. Raymond have succeeded to the practice of Dr. Brannon at this place. At this place, that means here, Flagstaff. We'll get into Dr. Mellick in a minute. And then over here on the right, everybody out here knew each other, and especially the folks here at Grand Canyon. They would have to go to Flagstaff for primary care, or if it wasn't, a true emergency where they couldn't move. But you do have the manager of the hotel, El Tovar, Charles Brandt, stayed for a little while with the Raymonds in Flagstaff, back in the day when gossip was news. I guess it still is. Then you have Dr. Raymond here, called to the El Tovar to assist with the tourist who wrenched his shoulder in Hermit Creek Camp. And this is really cool. Dr. Raymond made the record trip in his Ford, arriving here after about 4 hours on the road. Yesterday morning, it took me 1 hour and 10 minutes to get from the city limits of Flagstaff here inside the park. So 4 hours in 1916 on those probably mostly dirt roads. Not all of them would have been paved at that time. And here we have Frank Wines, ranger at Grand Canyon, severely burned by a detonating cap that I guess spilled or kind of blew up on him. And Dr. Raymond had to run up with the antitoxin to treat that. 1922, there would have been doctors in the park, so they probably didn't have the materials to treat the medicine needed to treat this injury, so Raymond probably assisted another doctor who's not mentioned here. Getting into the pioneer doctors of Williams. Williams is much more important, at least when it comes to the doctors and, just being closer to the canyon and also at the end of the Grand Canyon Railroad. It was just easier for doctors to get up to the canyon or for people to get to Williams once that railroad had been completed in 1901. 1901, And that brings us to pretty much just one. Well, I'll mention a couple of others, but Prince Albert Mellick. He was the primary doctor in Williams from the mid to early to mid 1890s, all the way into the late 1920s. And he was a huge automobile and motorcycle enthusiast, might have been the first person to drive a motorcycle, among the first people to drive a motorcycle to Grand Canyon. So there he's listed in the Williams newspaper there as the city physician. We'll get to Dr. Roundsville right underneath him in a second. He arrived in Williams in the 1890s, worked for one of the local lumber outfits as a house surgeon. He would then go on to be the kind of head surgeon for this district, the Williams Grand Canyon district of the Santa Fe Railroad Company. And he had a car, a box car, that he got to use to take up to the canyon or to other places along the rail line where they could see patients. And it wasn't a dedicated doctor's car, but they called it the doctor's car anytime he was using it. And that's what they used before there were any dedicated facilities here inside the park. They used tents, they used shacks, they used box cars. So that's what these guys were dealing with and working with. They were very important, the Mellicks, in developing Williams into a nice town because it had quite a rowdy and tough reputation in those days. And unfortunately, his brother was killed in the line of duty as Williams' town marshal just a few months into the job, shot in a gunfight. Mellick opened the first hospital in Williams, 1895 to 1930, regularly employed at least a few other doctors and nurses over the years. And here we are. Here he's making the run from Williams in about 4 hours. This was 3 years before Dr. Raymond made his record run from Flagstaff, so still took 4 hours in an automobile to get up to the canyon from Williams. A few more excerpts from the newspaper. Here we got a couple of tourists, but the majority of incidents and accidents that they would respond to and come to the canyon for were usually work-related. Accidents on the railroad, the lumber companies, the mining companies, they were mostly coming up for that. It seems the tourists back then were a little bit more safe than our modern variety. But visitors still got, I don't want to necessarily say that was true because I don't have the statistics to back that up, but tourists did get into accidents. Here we have a young man, 10-year-old son of Mr. and Mrs. Ellen Wood of Prescott, kicked in the forehead by a mule. Thankfully, he survived and he recovered. Here we have Dr. Mellick attending to several railroad men with colds. Also saw a Native American woman with pneumonia, and it says here, this woman had to depend entirely upon tourist doctors for medical attention. There had been one or more of these at the canyon each day during her sickness. And as you see from my dates there, 1899 to 1920, doctors were fairly common visitors to Grand Canyon. And here we go, George Campbell, a quote-unquote tourist. Attempting to board a freight in the local yards, fell in the pit, broke his leg. Dr. Mellick set the bone. 1913, a really bad wreck happened on the Grand Canyon Railroad when the train derailed after colliding with a herd of sheep and cattle. Thankfully, no fatalities, but there were a lot of fatalities in these days on the railroads. There were quite a few accidents, but thankfully no incredibly major injuries here and no fatalities, but there were a few injuries where Dr. Mellick had to dress an injured hand and take a few others out. And then here, this one's interesting. Engineer Tucker severely injured by exploding gun. Got to go down over here, this second paragraph. Accident occurred while Mr. and Mrs. Tucker were riding in the back seat of the automobile. He stood up and shot a prairie dog, but the gun exploded in his face. And metal was buried into his left eye. Dr. Mellick did what he could, but he's not a surgeon, definitely not an eye surgeon, so he sent the man on to Los Angeles. So please, don't shoot the prairie dogs. He was a road warrior. He was all about cars, he was all about motorcycles, and he was really about developing the roads up to Grand Canyon. Probably because he saw so many accidents on the railroad, and he probably had this idea that automobile traffic was safer, a safer mode of travel for at least individuals, but I don't know about that necessarily. He was a crack shot, too. Half of the references I found in the local newspapers about Melek were about hunting competitions, shooting tournaments, and he was very, very good, it seems, almost always winning every single time. Shot 28 jackrabbits and cottontails in one day. And a spy buster of course, 1917, 1918, the United States enters World War I. There's a lot of hysteria about spies, and especially German spies. This guy was arrested in Williams, but he tried to commit suicide, and, well, he was successful. He did end up dying, but Dr. Melek came to treat that man, and in his delirium and everything before he passed away, he said enough to Dr. Melek to basically convince the doctor that he was indeed a German spy. He did have nurses at the hospital, and they would enjoy the canyon. So a couple little blurbs back in the papers when, gossip and mundane items would make the news. But his nurses would go up to enjoy Grand Canyon on their days off. And here we have Miss Anna Hall at Bass's Camp, and Catherine Overholzer. That's her maiden name. She married a man named Mr. Appold in Williams, and the whole family went up to the canyon one day. Clymer Jeffries, he was an employee for Dr. Melek. He worked at the hospital. Here's a few blurbs about him. Mostly here on the left, these are him responding to railroad accidents or incidents on the railroad. Here we have him treating a tourist afflicted with tonsillitis. They tried to go down the trail, but forced to return, and contracted a high fever. This one's kind of interesting. No doctor needed. One day during the first part of this week, a Mexican went to Dr. Clymer Jeffries' office and asked what should be done for a rattlesnake bite, as one of the men in the camp had been bitten. Upon inquiry, it developed that the man had met the snake 2 days previously. Dr. Jeffries told the Mexican that if the victim of the snake venom was still alive, he doesn't need a doctor, he's good. I don't know about that. Two other doctors in Williams in those early days. Just real quick, you have Dr. A.G. Roundsville. He was the first druggist and pharmacist in Williams, and he was also the house surgeon at the Cameron Hotel. 1905, he was appointed or hired in that position. He didn't live or work here all the time. He would just get a telegram or something, and then he would make a run up to the canyon. Dr. Adolf Tyroller, he was really involved with the mining and the investment into mining in this area. The Azurite Copper Company, those were mostly claims just south of Anita along the Grand Canyon Railway, so it would have been kind of in the valley area. He was also a contract doctor for the Santa Fe Railroad. And here's a few blurbs about those two pointed house surgeon, Cameron Hotel, Dr. Roundsville, and here's two incidents on the railroad. Oh, sorry, this is a railroad, another railroad wreck in 1902 that Dr. Tyroller had to respond to, and in this case, there were fatalities. And here he's attending to an agent at the Bright Angel Hotel who developed typhus, or typhoid. Then comes the transition from the pioneer era into the time of the Park Service. And right about that same time, we had the Spanish flu pandemic, 1918 to 1919. This picture was not taken at Grand Canyon. First wave was in October and December of 1918. Dr. Mary Neff, very, very important in the medical and healthcare history of Arizona. She was one of the first psychiatrists and the first neurologists to work in Arizona, and basically was the only neurologist for many, many years. And she was able to do lots of really great stuff. And she organized a wonderful, or at least she organized a team of doctors to come up and thankfully treat the people here at Grand Canyon. Second wave in the spring, Ralph Berry unfortunately passed away, son of Pete Berry. Park Service era. Park Service established 1919. First doctors were mostly hired by the Public Health Service. Hard to find information on this stuff, but thankfully someone's got me covered. This afternoon, Mr. Ronan King will be talking about the Public Health Service here at Grand Canyon. The Invisible Corps, aptly named. Oh, pardon me, I'm going too fast. Lillian Caddy, she was a nurse here at the El Tovar from 1919 to 1931, and she was considered the Good Samaritan of Grand Canyon. She married a mule guide. They had a son here at Grand Canyon. They would divorce, and she would move to Los Angeles during World War II. But for many, many years, she worked in the El Tovar as a nurse and at the hospital. She did respond to the Reeves Griffin death on the Kaibab Trail. Unfortunately, he was already dead. And she was also first responder to the Elsie Reed shooting. Was it murder or suicide? She says suicide, and the coroner's inquest, who really knows? That's definitely a great topic for the future. Grand Canyon Hospital, dedicated in 1931. They did hire a few doctors, got a few names from Polishing the Jewel, but not too much information that I can find. Here's some pamphlets from the 1930s. Doctors, part of the miscellaneous services offered, they definitely wanted to do that. And just real fast, the Havasupai and the Wallapai. We're just going to skip over this. Oh, real fast. The Wallapai and the Havasupai, of course, probably wouldn't have, trusted too many white doctors, so the medicine men would have been really important. There's Rock Jones on the left. Florence Barker spent 30 years on the reservation, multiple reservations, Navajo Nation, Wallapai, Havasupai, and on several Pueblo nations in New Mexico. So just real fast, we're going to go through a couple of photos of her, since I'm at the end. Here's Navajo Nation. That was the mission that she lived and worked in, more Navajo Nation. This was on his visit in the 50s when they finally had color photos. Valentine and Supai. There's Florence Barker right there. Her collection at NAU is so cool. If you have a chance, go check it out. There she is with the kids in front of the schoolhouse. There's Rock Jones again. Or actually, that might be Big Jim. And there she is at the canyon. Thank you all so very, very much.